What's the greatest obstacle or challenge facing you on your path to becoming financially free? For most of us, it's the time it takes to even focus on it. We're so busy with our lives that we don't even know where to start. Come join Joey and I and the team in Nashville, Tennessee, August 9th through the 11th, as we break down the different ways that you can become financially free and introduce you to different strategies and speakers who can help you on that first step.
You have questions? This event is designed to give you the answers, to take action fast, to turn the decades it's taken us to learn this and turn them into days. Don't hesitate. Go to wealthwithoutwallstreet.com/live. And don't forget to use the promo code podcast to get a deep discount. Wealth Without Wall Street Tribe, excited to introduce you to our friend, Kevin Donahue. Kevin, so glad to have you, man.
Hey, thanks for having me on the show, guys.
Kevin, we're talking about a subject matter that many people, in my opinion, as it relates to cybersecurity, have just a small sliver into understanding what it is. To the point, I think, that maybe even we put our head in the sand and just assume it doesn't exist for us. Why is this so important for us to be covering for entrepreneurs and business owners right now?
Well, I think what we'll talk about today are the 4 truths of cybersecurity. I'm partners with a gentleman named Scott Augenbaum, who was on the FBI Cyber Task Force, a senior supervisory agent. And so the challenge is that most people do bury their heads in the sand, and what happens is the threat landscape is completely in their blind spot. So I think what's important probably for your audience, for you guys, and for most people is that we at least take it from the blind spot and put it in the periphery, or hopefully sort of right in your face, so you understand what threats are out there. Because truth one is most people don't expect to be a victim of cybercrime. They don't expect it. And so when they get attacked, whether it's a ransomware attack, whether it's a money wired out of their account, whether it's a sexploitation, they're shocked. And so they are left in terrible shape. And so, so I think it's important to discuss this. The analogy I use is we all do fire drills from elementary school all the way through high school, and everyone knows what to do, where to go, and it becomes not a big deal, but no one prepares for a cyber threat. And a cyber threat can really, really take a huge toll on an individual, on a family, and of course, companies as well.
Well, the other thing I'll add to this, Kevin, is just recently I was hearing about AI and how it's getting rid of certain industries as a result of the continued growth in that area. But cybersecurity was one of the industries that they said was going to grow as a result of AI and the constant growth in that space. So we already know in the back of our minds that it could happen. Like, I think nobody's completely off base to think that it couldn't happen, but it seems like really far off. And I think the reason why it's important for me that we're talking about this is people who are listening to this show are building an incredible system, right? A passive income greater than monthly expenses system that potentially will live on for legacy, like for generations.
Yes.
And with one of these threats that you're talking about could literally wipe all of the hard work that they've put in out. And so for me, that's the reason why I'm interested in this conversation today. Russ, what would you add to that?
Well, Kevin, I want to learn from you in this process. What is the thing you mentioned? Truth number 1 is no one expects to be a victim. Give me an example of what that looks like, because I want to stay with you. I want to not just go, well, this is just too big of a topic for me. I don't understand it. Let me move on to a topic that's more exciting, like, hey, let me build another stream of passive income. We realize this is one of those on the right side, a monthly expense, maybe even bigger than a monthly expense. This is like a generational expense could happen. Tell me about a victim. Tell me about a scenario that wakes me up to this so we can really dig into it.
Yeah, great question. And I'll give you a few because, what I do now, I'm the one that gets the phone call, the panic phone call, because the police can't help, the feds can't help, so I get a call. What can I do now? And one example, there was a CEO of a company, and he, we were meeting and we were talking about cybersecurity, and his face went white. He was like, this just happened to my family 2 days ago. And his son was sexploited. And when I say sexploitation, what that means is, in this case, a pretty girl friend requested him on one of the social media apps, and he became friendly with her. And then at some point, he probably sent a naked picture. Well, it wasn't a girl. It was some guys in Nigeria or wherever they were from. And they said, if you don't send us money, we're going to send this to all of your friends. Like, what you have to understand is the trauma that causes for that 15-year-old, 16-year-old, 14-year-old. And they don't know what to do, and they don't know where to go because there's shame involved. There's a consortium between the Department of Justice and the private sector, and we meet quarterly. And the last conversation that we had was about this. And what I learned was, and this is how detrimental this is, that the suicide rate has gone through the roof for teenagers because of this exact threat. And no one expects this threat to happen. You're just on social media. You're having fun. You're making friends, right? And in this case, the kid sent over his allowance. I think he had $150 a month on his card, and then he borrowed his brother's and he sent it over. And the father was like, "Why did you send your brother's money out?" He was like, "I wanted to buy some sneakers." The next day, came to his father and said, "Here's what actually happened." He goes, "I shut them off. I blocked them." So that's just one scenario. Another scenario is the average hacker is inside your system between 6 and 18 months before they take action. These cyber folks, it's not that they're technically astute. They understand social dynamics. And so they are engineering these situations where they're watching traffic go back and forth. They're watching who's emailing who, when they're emailing, what invoices are being sent, what bills are being paid, and then they just put themselves in the middle. And I had a friend, he's an entrepreneur, started a company about 3 years ago in the sporting goods arena. And someone sent him an invoice for the factory in China, and he wired $300,000 out. It's one of the very few times I've seen him actually get it back. And it's not like he got it back, but the factory actually, they actually paid, they paid him back, the factory, because they said it could have happened on our end. Right? But it's really important to understand that these hackers are in your system for a long time, watching the dynamics go back and forth. So it's important to build strategies within your family, simple strategies, having a password or having a password question. Joey, you mentioned AI. The big threat now is voice AI. What do you do when your elderly parent gets a call from their grandkid requesting money? Right? What do you do when you get a call from your spouse or a voice message from your spouse saying, "Hey, I need you to wire me money"? And, you think you wouldn't fall for it, but people fall for it all the time. We're all familiar with phishing, so we're kind of on alert for the email phishing. There's also smishing, which is SMS phishing. And the big one that no one talks about, they've put a term to it called quishing, which is QR code phishing. How often do you go to a restaurant and you just scan the QR code, whatever is on the table, off the menu? Right? And now you're on your phone. Well, all it takes is a hacker to put a sticker or put their own QR code menu on the table. And now they've downloaded all of your information, all of your data. And what are you going to do about it? So these people lurk in the backgrounds. They are really geniuses. And what we hear in the headlines are Russia and China or, somewhere, some faraway place. But the fact is, we got 14, 15, 16-year-olds on the dark web downloading ransomware as a service, learning all these techniques, and they're very, very good. So the threat, it could be from the 15-year-old right up the street who knows you're a multimillionaire.
It's so crazy. As you're talking about these things, I realized that, like, even recently, when you talk about social media, I got a notice on Facebook that I had, it was something like, "Hey, you're out of compliance with blah, blah, blah. Click here. We've shut down your account," or something like this. And I click on it. It looks like, you talk about the phishing stuff, you can tell an email that is phishing email typically. This looked like a prompt from Facebook itself. It had all of the things that you would look for. I click on it and it says log in to do so-and-so, whatever, to get this, to start the dispute process or whatever. I log in, boom, the account is gone immediately. And it took me several days to track down through connections, somebody at Facebook that could basically get me turned back on. And I found out that in the background, they had gone into my Facebook ads business account and were charging my card that was on file. It would only end up being like $30 or $40. But had I not, tracked down somebody that could have got this corrected, they would have just continued to just pour money out of that account. And I had no way, unless I just canceled the card, to stop it from happening. And so anyways, as you were talking about this, I'm like, man, he's right. Like there's so many more things that people are just getting smarter and smarter, and it's looking more and more legit.
Yeah. And this is why it's important to have this discussion, and it's a discussion that most people either aren't having or don't want to have. So it just at least brings it in the periphery so that you're aware. In that case, you found yourself aware something's not quite right. And then thankfully you had a credit card. Sometimes you have a debit card. It makes it more difficult to recoup funds. So using a credit card in that instance is a very wise thing to do. And there's story after story. We had a guy who called me, had a $1.3 million loss, had an old dormant business email account he forgot about. And the hacker hacked in, was able to get in touch with his bank and wired $1.3 million to China. And he was unable to recoup it. And then it becomes very difficult. And so here's the other piece too. There's the actual loss, right? But then there's also the emotional toll, right? You had to, and the toll of recouping, like you had to spend time on that instead of time on your business or time building your system or time building your wealth. People do not understand the emotional toll this takes when there's a major loss. It's like when your house or your car has been broken into, you feel violated. And so there's an emotional toll here that can't be understated for entrepreneurs, executives, especially for people that are building their wealth. It can be very disheartening. And as CEOs, executives, and fathers or mothers, it's our responsibility to protect our family. And that's why I say, how do you protect your most important asset? Your family, which includes your wealth. It includes your privacy, your data, your children, everything that goes along with it.
So let's talk about that. You said the first truth is no one expects to be a victim. I don't think we want to be a victim. We want to be proactive to some degree because, to be honest, I don't even know what to do. I was asking my wife on the way here, like, what do you think about when it comes to this? And she's like, I don't know. What is on my phone? Like, how often should I have someone go check my stuff off the dark web? And she's saying that word because, we've all heard that word, but nobody really knows what it means. What are some of those basics that we should be doing so that we aren't the victim?
Yeah, a great question. The first thing is get educated. Everyone should have the minimal education on what to do, who to call, just so you have the awareness. The fire drill methodology. It's like, okay, what happens? Okay, what do I do if I feel like I've been attacked? But there's also things you can do. You can get something as simple as getting a VPN, which is a virtual private network. There are companies out there like us that will do dark web monitoring, will do data broker takedowns. In other words, we'll do all the stuff on the back end. We even provide an insurance policy up to $5 million if there's a loss, these types of things. So there's services out there that you can do. But then as a family, really having this discussion around the dinner table and then putting together some passwords, or I like to have a question. So my family has a question. And if someone calls and you ask a question, how many monkeys are in the zoo? And each person in our family has a different answer. Like mine would be purple elephants, let's say. That's not what it is, but I'll just say that for the show. So that way they know it's me. You're actually talking to Kevin Donahue and not some voice synthesized or someone else, right? And then also putting policies with your bank, calling your bank and saying, hey, no money is allowed to be wired out of my account with dual voice authentication, meaning mine and my wife or mine and my partner, whatever it may be, right? And then also setting some parameters with the family, saying, hey, never send more than $100. And this is important for the elderly. We're actually developing a program right now for the senior assisted living places because these folks are major targets. The biggest vulnerability, even in the largest corporations that have chief information security officers and the latest technology, the biggest vulnerability are always human beings. They go after the new people, the interns. And this is the one of the biggest scams is the gift card scam. they'll call the intern and say, hey, listen, this is Frank, the CEO, and I need you to go to Target and get me $2,500 worth of gift cards for our clients. Let me know once you have them. And the intern, being a dutiful person and helpful person, runs to Target and gets the gift cards. And then, of course, they wire those gift cards to the hacker, right? So it's people are always the vulnerability. So it's educating your family. We say every person in your family that has a mobile device, access to the internet, or a gaming system needs to take our education course, or at least some sort of education course at a minimum.
And so that's what I was going to ask you, as far as like resources that do educate. You mentioned in a course, what other things can somebody do to be educated? What would you recommend as far as other resources?
Books, I mentioned my partner's book. I have it here, The Secret to Cybersecurity. That's a solid resource right there. That's Scott. Scott is a former retired supervisory agent with the FBI Cyber Task Force, and he's investigated over 1,000 cyber crimes. So he really gets it. And then also you can go on YouTube. The great educator of the world right now is YouTube, and you can find videos on YouTube of folks that'll give you an easy training course. But the key is awareness.
All right. By the way, Tribe, I'm just letting you know, we're going to go ahead and create a page where some of these resources that Kevin's mentioning will be found. So wealthwithoutwallstreet.com/cybersecurity. This is too important for us not to create a dedicated place for these things to be updated from time to time and available to you. So wealthwithoutwallstreet.com/cybersecurity. Go there. You can get access to what we're talking about now.
Tribe, listen up. We're entering into the election year. This is the time where people are going to get super fearful. We're going to see businesses start to dry up. We're going to see opportunities, though, pile up for us only if we're prepared.
That's right. You get to choose right now. Will you allow this time frame to negatively affect you and your business and your investments? Or will you be prepared to take advantage of these huge opportunities that come on the backside of this because you're prepared with cash?
Let's get our house in order. If you haven't already maximized the infinite banking concept in your life, here's the chance for you to start learning. Go to wealthwithoutwallstreet.com/IBC. Take our free webinar so that you can start getting equipped with the things that you need to know so that you can take action on this looming event. One of the things that you mentioned is that everyone who has a device, access to the internet, should know these things, right? Well, to be honest, I mean, I'm going to have to take this on as the family head to go do this research to understand it. And what I mean by that is I'm going to hire someone like you that's going to do it for me because I'm already overwhelmed with this stuff. Yes. But I'm going to drive back to my house after I leave this podcast, and I'm going to go to my daughters and my wife who has a cell phone in their hand, and I'm going to say, I want you to do this or be aware of that. What would be those two things that you would tell them to do right away?
Get a VPN if you can, like a virtual private network within your home. That will be the first thing. So that will kind of anonymize you. And then I would just, go through your phone, and Apple has a really great, like a scam alert right now. We put another application on top of that for scams. But yeah, I would go through and just delete all old emails, go through spam, and just, let them know of the threat. And then go through social media. And there's people lurking on your social media. And if you haven't met them before, if you don't know them personally, delete them. Because people get friend requests, and they'll, it's happened to me too, where I've had people request me on Instagram or LinkedIn. I'm more liberal with, but they're clearly bad actors trying to get at me, impersonating someone else. So I think awareness is number one.
So the VPN thing's interesting, right? I just pulled up my phone, pulled up settings. I have a VPN. And of course, it was toggled off. So I just pressed on. I don't even know what I just did there, but it seems like I just took the first step to being secure state.
That's right.
Hey, thank you, Russ, for doing that. You showed me after the podcast how you did that.
What is VPN? Like, what did I just do?
It's probably a setting on your phone, and I don't know how secure that is, but it's a virtual private network. It allows you to basically anonymously be on the internet and anonymously do things.
So when you say that, I think of like the incognito window on Google, but this is even more sophisticated than that.
It's similar. Yeah, it's similar. Okay. These are little things that you can do to just protect your privacy. And that's the other part too, is it's, It's your private data. Once someone has your information, then they can use that to go get loans, apply for credit cards, apply for jobs, all kinds of things. So the other piece is private data. And we see in the headlines every day where there's been a breach. And what happens is the reason that hackers go after this private data from these big corporations is because they can get $10 to $15 per record on the dark web. There's forums on the dark web where data is for sale. That's why it's important to have someone monitoring the dark web for you. And the challenge is once it's on the dark web, it's there. There's not much you can do about it, but you can do things like change passwords and stuff like that, which is very helpful. But yeah, so they get $15 per record, and it's why healthcare records are so valuable. And then they'll hack into a company, they'll steal 1,000 records or 10,000 records, and they make $1 million.
Well, you're talking about the real concern is the data itself. Mm-hmm. In my mind, and I'll just tell you, I think maybe this is the way other people think, so I'll just bring it up as a possible question. I've always considered the fact, well, what's the worst that can happen? They steal my credit card, they buy some things, I recognize it, I go back to the credit card, I say, hey, shut this off, this is fraud. In fact, it's happened to me before. And boom, they issue me a new card, they credit me back the fraudulent charges, and we move on. But you're bringing up the bigger concern, which is the data. And that's the part that then lives on as a potential ongoing threat that I haven't really considered the value of up to this point. And you're saying at that point, you really can't do anything because it's already out there. What would be the possible ways to stop? Let's just say somebody did go in and get all of my personal data that was used to open a credit card. Mm-hmm. Instead of just using the card and I now get these fraudulent charges back, they have the information to go apply on my behalf.
That's right.
What can be done at that point?
Well, it's why you have services that can protect you from these type of mayhem, where you have insurance in place and you have other credit monitoring and these types of things in place that can help you kind of mitigate those circumstances. Because the other part too is the time and the toll. Once someone hacks your information, they're going out and putting up all sorts of credit cards, applying for things all over the world in your name. It's putting a stop to those things. And once it doesn't work, they'll keep doing it until it doesn't work anymore. And so once it doesn't work anymore, then it gets more difficult.
So Kevin, I was just thinking through as you were talking, there's so many different items, right? Like I think the average person is considering one, where do I store my passwords, right? There's sites like LastPass, for instance, a very well-used one. I want to have you talk about that. One question is, what about where do I store my credit cards? Like, should I be storing them on my phone and using Apple Pay? Is that a secure place to do it? Or should, my wife is asking me this, like, well, what do these sites like Athleta or Lululemon or whatever she frequents, I have my credit card on those sites and when I make purchases, or should I use like a PayPal or one dedicated site that then every time I go on all these other sites, I just use it. So now I've stored it at one place and not on all these different places. Those are a couple of things that come to my mind, and I want you to address those. But you hit me a second ago, and I'm going to have to probably remind you about that. I'm sorry about the way my brain is just, like firing at all these cylinders. You said applying for jobs, and that really hung me up there for a second. I want to understand the applying for jobs. Because I feel like Joey's put my resume out there because I keep getting text messages about like an emails like about recruiting me to something. I'm like, I don't even understand what happened. I'm like, well, maybe I just got hacked and somebody's trying to apply for jobs. I just thought it was a joke from Joey. Why would someone apply for a job in my name?
Or it may not be apply for a job. It's basically they want to steal your data. But they could apply for anything all over the world. And so basically, someone could apply for a job. This is part of the social engineering, right? Using your resume, using your information to get to basically fish someone into a conversation, and then getting access and building rapport, and then you're in their system. Does that make sense?
I got you. So then they do that, and they use me as a legit person to then gain insight so they're trying to use me for the authority piece. Got it. Okay. All right, now
exactly
talk about password sites. Talk about where we store credit cards a little bit.
Yeah, LastPass, those are fine. Those are all great. They're encrypted. You could use those. I mean, the fact is we have to live in this society that we live in. And so we're not going to like become Amish, right? And ride around in buggies and, do commerce through trade. But yeah, the credit card, I use one credit card for all of my online purchases. So I just assume that one, if it gets hacked, I can just cancel it. It's not a big deal. And then sometimes I'll use different strategies. Like I'll misspell my last name on certain sites, instead of Donahue, I'll be Donohoe. It's funny, if you guys are familiar with Dave Asprey, the biohacker, he originally was an ethical hacker in the cybersecurity world. And him and I exchanged a couple of ideas, sometimes use a false birth date, and these types of things on certain sites that it's not important. And then I do have an old Yahoo account that I use for all my opt-ins. So I never use my email account. I have an old Yahoo. If I opt into something, whether it's Kroger or, you name the site, get a free report, I'll use my old Yahoo account. And that way, that is sort of, I expect that to be hacked and spammed a lot. So those are a couple quick tactics you can use.
What about as far as like Apple Pay and all that Russ brought up? Is that a secure thing in your mind, or is it something we should steer clear of?
No, it's fine. I mean, the good news there is we're protected by the policy that Visa and MasterCard have in place as well. So, Apple's good enough. I mean, they may get hacked, they may not, but they have a pretty comprehensive cybersecurity team in place. So, like I said, you have to kind of pick and choose your battles, who you're going to trust, and what you're going to where you're willing to put your information in. Sometimes you don't have a choice. You go to the doctor, you have to fill out their forms, and you're hoping that they're following HIPAA and high trust regulations, and that your information is secure. But then again, even the most secure facilities, it just takes one person to leave the door cracked or leave the door unlocked, and then So it's the world we live in. So I think the point here is, you just don't want to ignore the fact that there's some simple steps you can take. Right, Russ, you just took one, putting on your VPN. There's companies that are out there that have fairly, inexpensive ways to be able to protect your family and your fortune and your wealth and your business. The other piece too here is, I've worked in the past with a title company out of Florida. A lot of real estate transactions, these bad actors want to get in between them, because they're wiring billions of dollars per year. And so, take the littlest steps. If you're a real estate agent, a broker, a title company, you got to take the bare minimum steps to be able to protect your business as well as your families.
So, Scott, I want to give people what to do now, right? For those like me who really are going to want to just seek someone out to do the thing, right? I've turned on VPN. I'm going to go home and get all my family's phones on VPN, and they're going to ask me what that is, and we're going to Google it together. But past that, okay, I want to use someone like you. Your group obviously specializes in higher net worth people. You work a lot with family offices, and I want to know who and how do I connect with someone like you. But also, I'm a little bit nervous to say, hey, I reach out to Kevin's team, for instance. What does that even cost? Because then now I don't know, I don't understand cybersecurity, but then I'm like, well, what's the bigger risk being, I don't really understand the cost. So maybe I just hopefully run under the radar. Nobody comes and gets me, and then I don't have to pay this fee. What does it look like to work with a team like yours or anyone?
Sure. Yeah. For us, we take a 4-tiered approach. Number one is education. So I mentioned Scott's book. We also have an education program, a 15-module program that, like I said, we say anyone with a mobile device or a game console needs to take this training. And so you can take active steps and get your family educated. Number two is we put a technology system in place, which includes a VPN, includes dark web monitoring, includes all the pieces of the puzzle that you need. And then we have incident response. I mentioned this earlier. When something happens, who are you going to call? The local sheriff ain't going to be able to help you. Right? Like they just don't know what to do. So you need to have someone on call who's an expert that can do two things. One is mitigate the problem immediately. And number two is help you navigate law enforcement if you have to. We were working on a big cryptocurrency scam where a guy he said it was a $30 million loss. It looks like more like a $7 million loss. But, he's in the midst working with the FBI. That's also a difficult thing to navigate when you're working with law enforcement. And then number 4 is we have a unique, I say I'm the head of the CIA for high net worth individuals and families. We have an intelligence arm as well. So we do what we call stealth threat assessments, essentially background checks. So when you're partnering with someone, when you're looking to make an investment, we can do, and these are international intel folks that do these for us. You can do these background checks. So the people that you're, embedding with your family or your business or your family office, right? So that's the 4-tiered step we take, this 4-tier approach. What does that cost? I mean, our education program is relatively inexpensive. You can get Scott's book for, $19. But typically we're looking at between $300 and $500 a month for our services to be able to protect your family from that holistic standpoint.
Excellent. Well, that gives us at least a point of reference, right? Because people, like you said, Russ, I don't think people understand, 1, the threats facing them, and then 2, what's a reasonable, a quote unquote, insurance against that, because that's what it's really about is, and I think don't undersell the idea that there's someone to reach out to.
Yes.
To your point. Yeah. I've not been in that position other than that really small thing that I mentioned on Facebook. And I'll tell you, there was nobody to go to. I knew at least somebody at Facebook could potentially help, and I had no connections there. So I had to kind of just do this whole networking thing to figure it out. But man, that is so valuable what you're talking about. So, Kevin, the things that we've talked about today, I think we've uncovered some things. I think we've kind of shown people what is the possible threats. And you mentioned there's 4 truths. I don't know if we got through all of them, but you mentioned that no one is expecting to be a victim. I think that's huge. That's the first one. The second, you may have mentioned, but I'll just kind of reference it from Scott's book here, is once they have your information, it's almost impossible to get it back. Your money or your information. That's correct. And how would you round out the last 2 of the 4 truths?
Well, Scott was in law enforcement. So he, I had a conversation with a guy the other day. I'm like, the guy who had the big loss. I said, what do you want? He goes, I want the guy in jail. I want his wife in jail. And I want my money back. I'm like, pick one. He goes, I want my money back. I'm like, I thought so. I said, because, what happens is it becomes sometimes an international operation because these folks are operating outside the U.S. borders. So forget it. These guys aren't going to jail. So that's the other part. So they're outside of the long arm of law enforcement. And then the last one is most cybercrime can be prevented. Right? Like if you just would have done one little thing or not clicked on the link or, not given over your information to the person who called you. My wife listens in on these conversations all the time. So she's privy to a lot of this stuff and she hears the horror stories. She got a call the other day from Citibank and it was the fraud department saying that someone was applying for a credit card in her name. She goes, I don't believe you. Click, hung up on him. I was like, and she's like, we need your information. She's like, nope, click. I'm like, good work. And then they called back and they had to verify 2-3 ways to verify. And she's like, okay, someone did actually try to apply for a credit card in my name. And she was able to speak to the fraud department. So that simple awareness, right? Just because she's a part of this conversation made her aware enough that she wasn't willing to have a conversation with a stranger who sounded like they had authority and sounded like there was a crisis. Because you have to understand, these bad actors are playing on these social dynamics. Your daughter's in jail. You missed jury duty. There's a warrant for your arrest. Like all of these things are scams, right? I'll actually send you a presentation that we just put together a couple of days ago with all the different scams for the elderly. Love interests. There's something called pig butchering. I don't know why they gave it that term, but basically it's a romance scam. And they use the cryptocurrency platforms to launder the money. And we're talking about millions and millions and millions per year. So they play on the emotion. So most of these cyber crimes can be prevented. It's really a matter of being aware and just having the education. Simple stuff, not major. You don't have to go get a degree. It's just being aware of what the threat is.
Kevin, thank you so much for coming on. One, for doing this. This is obviously a big, huge blue ocean opportunity for those in your field to help people because there's so much, unfortunately, bad stuff going out there. And for us listening, Tribe, I mean, we need to be better stewards of our wealth in lots of ways, but this is one of those that I would bet you're probably not doing the best you possibly can. So whether it's reading a book, getting on a YouTube, educating your family, adding VPN, doing the little steps, because truth number 4 really hits hard, Kevin, when you say it could have been avoided. We don't have to go through all that pain. I think it starts with a little self-education. And I know that we're going to have you come and speak to our mastermind soon. And I'm just so grateful that we're going to be able to do that just so that continues to be top of mind. Kevin, if somebody wants to connect with your team, we're using wealthwithoutwallstreet.com/cybersecurity. Are you good just putting all your resources there that you've shared so that way people can just go to one easy button and click it and get access to it?
Yes, sir. That's great. And I appreciate it.
Man, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you, Tribe, for listening. Hope you found value in this episode. And as always, have an amazing day.
This has been the Wealth Without Wall Street podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to the show to break free of the Wall Street mindset and begin building wealth on your own terms in places you understand so that your wealth will never run dry. See you next episode.